I'm 48 years old, and I've worked as a police officer in Alaska ever since I was 25. I love my job and would never trade it for anything. Like any occupation, it's had its ups and downs, but this one call I received last March was by far the most horrifying experience I've ever had. I was on my nightly patrol around 8 p.m. when dispatch radioed in that there was a 1090. For those who don't know, a 1090 is code for alarm in progress. I was the nearest unit to the address, so I headed over to see what was going on. It was reported that a silent alarm to a warehouse was set off. These types of calls were often pretty unpredictable, since about half of them were false alarms, like an employee accidentally setting off the alarm, while the other half could be a true break-in. I always treat every situation with caution since I've learned over the years it's best to be ready for anything. I flipped on my lights and sped up, heading to the address. It was about 10 minutes away, on a pretty quiet road with a few businesses that I was familiar with. Upon arrival, I pulled into the parking lot with my brights on to see if there was any visible signs of forced entry, such as a broken window, but everything looked good. I looped around the building, noticing 3 semi-truck trailers at the loading dock, and assumed that it was some sort of false alarm. The building looked like it was locked up for the day, so I waited right outside the main entrance until the owner was contacted. He said that there should be a janitor inside and that he'd give him a call to let him know what was going on. I called for backup, since we generally tend to involve multiple officers in a situation like this, for safety, and to also secure a perimeter in the case of a suspect trying to escape. After about 15 minutes, 3 backup units arrived. Now feeling more comfortable, I got out of the car along with another officer and we walked up to the front to peer through the window to see if anyone was inside. The owner still wasn't able to get a hold of the janitor on shift, so he told us that he'd bring a key. As we looked inside, we surprisingly noticed a man down the hallway and waved him down to come out and talk. He came up to the front and introduced himself as the janitor, so I radioed in to dispatch to let the owner know that the janitor let us in and he wouldn't be needed. I explained the situation to him and he seemed pretty shocked, telling me that he hadn't seen anything out of the ordinary. At this point, we were under the assumption that it was a false alarm, but we still wanted to do a once-over of the building to be sure. The janitor asked if he could get back to work, explaining that he had a lot of work to do, but we told him it could put him in danger if there was someone inside, so I asked him to wait on the bench. He seemed like a friendly guy, so we told him we'd make it quick so we don't mess up his schedule any more than we already have. The building had 2 levels. The first level was mainly aisles of boxes and packaging, and the second level was much smaller but only had offices. We did a sweep through the first floor and didn't find anything, so we took the elevator up to the second floor. As it opened, we had to turn on our flashlights since the nighttime lights in the hallway were very dim. We cleared the first 2 offices, being very cautious since we were in unfamiliar rooms with no lights. As we entered the third office, we found our first red flag. A large duffel bag was stuffed in the corner under the desk, filled with money, a safe, and miscellaneous items I assumed were taken from the packaging boxes downstairs on the first floor. We called it in, asking for any more available units to come since we were already possibly facing a robbery in progress. We finished searching the second floor, not finding anyone or anything else. I split up from my partner as we got off the elevator. He went to the front to question the janitor, while I went back into the main area to search for any clues. Strangely, I noticed a phone on the floor in the corner between the wall and a cardboard box. I picked it up, bringing it up front, asking the janitor if it was his. Upon asking, he told me that it was his and I handed it to him. To verify, I asked if he could unlock the phone to prove it was his. As I said that, he froze up and started acting suspicious. After a brief pause, he told me that it wasn't his and explained that it was probably another worker's phone. He gave it back to me, and I turned on the screen, looking at the phone, and my eyes widened. I saw 5 missed calls and 1 voice message from a contact labeled Boss. I instantly knew something was off and detained the janitor, since he should have been able to get into the phone if it was his. I put him in the back of my car and went back in the building and continued searching. I went back to the area where I found the phone and opened the garages leading to the back. I saw the 3 semi-truck trailers from earlier and stepped outside towards them. At that moment, I heard a faint, muffled screaming coming from the back of one of the trailers. I drew my gun, opening up the trailer. I was met with a man tied up in the corner, in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, covered in sweat. I cut him free and asked who he was. He told me he was the janitor and that some guy snuck in and attacked him as he was coming back inside after taking trash out to the dumpster. The intruder took his uniform off and put it on, then tied him up and threw him in the back of the trailer. I walked him to the front, where I handed him the phone and he was able to unlock it, proving his identity. We arrested the man who posed as the janitor and took him to jail. I'm just glad that I followed my instincts and continued to look when it originally sounded like it was a false alarm. I was finishing up my last week of field training before I was officially able to begin solo patrol. I spent my shifts with my field training officer, or FTO for short, with a guy named Rick. I lucked out that Rick was my FTO because he was extremely funny and nice, which made my training days go by much quicker. We were on patrol around 2 p.m. when we got a call for a welfare check on an elderly lady. Apparently, a neighbor hadn't seen any activity coming from the house in the past couple weeks, so they called it in to us to check on her to make sure everything was okay. As we were driving, Rick warned me that a lot of welfare checks were very upsetting, since it was common to find a deceased person inside. I prepared myself for the worst as we approached the house, since it was an elderly woman. As we arrived, I noticed that the lawn was growing over and the mail wasn't removed from the mailbox. At this point, we figured that the lady was deceased or the house was vacant. We walked up to the front door, ringing the doorbell and knocking, but there was no response. We tried the side and back door as well, but they were all locked. After exhausting all options, we were cleared for forced entry. Doing one final sweep before kicking down the door, we found an unlocked window in the backyard which looked to be the bedroom. Since I was the new guy, I was the first to go inside, which was quite difficult. There were dirty clothes and baskets piled up below the windowsill, which made it pretty hard. Once I made it in, I turned around to help my FTO get inside, grabbing his hand to pull him up. The first thing I noticed was a musty smell, but that wasn't surprising since the house had been locked up for the past couple weeks. Finding nothing in the bedroom, I opened the door to the hallway. We searched the guest bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, and living room, but found nothing. At this point, we assumed that the old lady must have taken off, since there was no sign of anyone being there. I opened the fridge, finding expired milk and eggs, which confirmed my assumption that the house was vacant. We called out, asking if anyone was there. There was no response. As I was looking around in the kitchen, my FTO shouted for me to come over, telling me that he found the door to the basement. It was the only spot we hadn't checked, and I was the one who had to go first. Unlike the main floor, there were no lights to the basement. Since it was so dark, I flipped on my flashlight and pointed it to the bottom of the stairs. It looked like the basement was unfinished, seeing cracked concrete at the bottom accompanied by cylinder blocks on the walls. Just as I was about to walk down, I shined my flashlight over to the railing and spotted streaks of blood descending all the way down. I shouted down the dark staircase, "Police, anyone down here?" And once again, we heard no response. I started descending down the steps, with my FTO following closely behind me. As I was about halfway down the steps, I heard a quiet but distinct noise of some sort of rustling coming from the room. I froze, turning to look at my FTO, who'd looked surprised hearing the noise too. He nudged me to continue walking down the steps, shouting, "Police, anyone down here?" There was no response, but definitely a distinct noise that continued to get louder the closer we approached. I made it to the bottom step, turning to the left to shine my flashlight into the room, and saw hundreds of boxes and antiques scattered all across the entire room. It looked like a hoarder's house. It was impossible to see at least half of the room due to the amount of stuff down there. As I started shining my flashlight across the room to look for any signs of the old lady, I stumbled across the shadow of what looked to be a person crouched in the back right corner of the room. I couldn't tell if it was my eyes playing tricks on me, so I approached the silhouette as I stumbled over everything on the floor, blocking my path. I yelled, "Ma'am, are you okay?" as I was now maybe about 5 to 10 feet away from the shadowy figure. I moved the cardboard box that was in between me and whoever this person was in the corner, now just being feet away. As I did this, I was shocked to see not the old lady, but a random guy covered in blood lunge at me, knocking me into the boxes behind. Thankfully, my FTO was right behind me and instantly tased the man, putting him in cuffs. He wouldn't respond to any of our questions when we were asking him who he was and why he was there. We arrested him, putting him in the back seat of the cruiser. We took him to the police station and dropped him off as a John Doe since he didn't have any form of identification on him when we searched him. It turns out, the old lady was visiting family out of state. That story happened about 8 years ago, and I have yet to witness a more bizarre and creepy incident to this day. My grandpa worked in law enforcement for 41 years. I recently began my career as a cop, so listening to his stories are especially interesting to me. A lot of his stories are pretty scary, but there's one that he told me that is downright terrifying. I'm going to tell the story from his perspective, since I'm currently with him as I'm writing this. I was on patrol with my partner one night when we got a call for suspected shots fired at an abandoned house just a couple minutes away from where I lived. I recognized the address as soon as I heard it, and instantly panicked since crime in my neighborhood was unheard of. My mind was racing, wondering if it was a faulty call or if an actual shooting was taking place. We pulled up to the front of the house, immediately seeing someone at the front, who fled on foot as soon as he saw us. My partner went after him, while I cautiously approached the house. It was pitch black, which added to the creepiness of the situation. I peered through the window to the right of the front door, and watched as a shadowy figure darted across the room out of my sight. I radioed into my partner, who lost the suspect during the foot chase. He came back to the house and we knocked on the door, saying that we were police and whoever was inside needed to open up. As I was saying this, we heard someone yelling for help. It was hard to tell which part of the house it was coming from, but it definitely sounded close. We called in for backup as we started to break down the door. We would usually wait to enter until we had extra assistance, but due to the urgent nature of the situation, we didn't wait. I walked in first and instantly saw blood all over the house. It was a pretty horrific sight. I walked down the dark, narrow hallway, which branched off to the kitchen on the right and the laundry room on the left. I went towards the kitchen, where I thought I heard the screaming. I saw a young male in the corner along the cabinets, who seemed to be unresponsive. He was bleeding from his arm and definitely lost a lot of blood. I flashed my light in his eyes and shook him, and he woke up and immediately began screaming. I calmed him down and tried to ask what happened, but he was in shock. My partner was radioing in updates to dispatch, notifying them that we needed an ambulance immediately. It was a very uneasy and unsettling feeling since we were in a dark, foreign place with a possibly active shooter. We didn't have any other information than what we were originally told, but we had to continue searching the house. My partner shouted, "Police, anyone in here?" And we heard someone respond coming from the upstairs level. We slowly crept up the stairs, shining our lights around, not knowing who was up there. I walked into what seemed to be the master bedroom and didn't see anyone. My partner nodded his head towards the walk-in closet, and he slowly opened the door as I had my gun pointed towards it with my flashlight in hand. There, I found 5 young males about the same age as the one we found in the kitchen, maybe 10 to 12 years old, hiding in the closet. The one was covered in blood, with what looked to be a bullet wound to the chest. I carefully carried him outside so he could receive immediate treatment when the ambulance arrived. My partner brought the 4 remaining boys down the stairs and out the door, getting their information to notify their parents. Once the backup units and EMS arrived, we went back into the house to make sure everyone was out. After thoroughly searching the entire property, we came up with nothing and forensics took over from that point on. They found an unregistered gun that was hidden behind the furnace in the basement, without any fingerprints on it. The creepiest part about it was that the boys all said that the gunman wore a creepy old man mask, like one you'd see on Halloween. The 2 boys with gunshot wounds were taken to the hospital and treated. They ended up making a full recovery. I'm just happy we got there when we did, and everyone survived.